Okay, so we're continuing to walk through the Book of Concord for our daily video devotions here at Edgewater, at least for another few weeks, because we have 4 sections left, right? So the first section we looked at was the Augsburg Confession, and the second section we looked at was the apology to the Augsburg Confession, the defense of the Augsburg Confession, and then we looked at the Smalcald Articles. The next section is going to be a little different because, first of all, it's not divided into a bunch of articles that kind of make it easy to break down. The second is it's very singular in its focus, right? So all of the previous sections we've gone through, they cover a whole wide range of topics, as they kind of lay out the fundamentals of our faith. This one, it's covering one very specific thing that we're only going to spend one video on because it's not something that is really a point of contention, at least for anyone in my congregation. No one's expressed that they're struggling with this to me, and that is, this next section is the Treatise on the Power and Primacy of the Pope. And essentially what it lays out is the Pope at Luther's time, and we would contend still the Pope today, has way more authority than is really appropriate for any human over the church. And it was more so when this was originally written, because the Pope, one could very easily argue, was the most powerful man in the world during Luther's time. Emperors, at least to some extent, answered to the Pope. The Pope controlled militaries and countries and politics and all sorts of things. And this article, it goes into historical evidence. It goes into the appropriate power and jurisdiction of bishops, and all this say that no person has the authority to speak, to add or remove from the Word of God. And that's the core of it, right? We believe, like, for example, when I preach, when a called and ordained servant of God preaches the Word of God faithfully, we say that is the spoken Word of God being proclaimed to the people there. But we never cross that line into saying, regardless of what he says, it is now to be taken as the Word of God, right? If I say something that's not in the Bible, that doesn't suddenly give it the authority of God. And if I try to dismiss something in the Bible, it's not dismissed, I'm just in denial, which is, that's not a faithful thing for me to do. But this is kind of speaking on that grander level. The Pope does not have the authority to add things to the Word of God, add demands on the church and her people, nor does he have the authority to remove anything from the Word of God. And we're going to kind of leave it there today, because we've talked a little bit about what the appropriate authority of a pastor is. So this devotion is kind of, I think, less devotional than a lot of them, because it's something that we just don't really deal with today. But what I would encourage you to do is, if you're curious about power structures in the church, we don't have a pope in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, but we do have a structure of authority in place. And if you're curious about that, I'm not going to cover it in the last 53 seconds of this devotion. Well, what I would point you to is, if you check out my buddy and I, Ben Olschlager, and I, we do a podcast called Man, Buns, and Jesus. You can find it on any of your podcasting apps, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio. We did one called, I think it was titled like LCMS Power Structure or something like that. And it talked about this very subject. So if you're interested in that, I would check out that podcast, because we kind of go into it much more in depth. But regardless, we don't view the Pope as authoritative in the way that he's sometime claimed to be. So if you have questions, comments, concerns, that's what the section below is for. And regardless, brothers and sisters, go in peace. Serve the Lord. Thanks be to God.